I stood here 15 years ago, and this was literally just a gravel landscape that rolled up to the parking lot.
The story that you told about the Dalai Lama.
He started to laugh, and he basically was just saying, so you make beauty out of waste. During the COVID years, we had to shut down. So the problem that we had was this is alive. We're surviving, we're here, but the challenges are more intense. What they meant in my life for a couple of years was just insanity.
To put it in very simple terms, we're taking poo water and turning it into extremely pure, living water.
Exactly.
In the USA, and honestly in most places around the world, kind of just become accustomed to having a slew of toxins within our food and water supply. So whether it's pesticides or heavy metals or pharmaceuticals or known carcinogens, known neurotoxins, all of these different types of chemicals that have been shown to lead to some sort of chronic disease or imbalance within the body. These standards have really mainly been based on what is considered acceptable or good enough to be safe. But we've been learning as a species that these standards that we've set, these systems that we have in place, they're just not really cutting it to be able to tackle the problem that every single one of us is being affected by. Not just us, but also the world that we live in. The very ecology is suffering because of our inability to deal with this issue in a way that is productive, that is efficient. One of my mentors, he would always say something to me. And he would say to me, Bryce, profound problems require profound solutions. So today, I'm setting out on a journey to try and find a profound solution to not just our wastewater problem, but also to water purification and how in the future for humanity, we can do it better. And I think I may have found one of the best solutions that I have come across in all of my research and anything that I've ever done. This one really blew me away. So thank you guys so much for being here. Of course, if you want to like this video, help get this message out to more people around the world, please do that. And of course, if you want to support the channel, just head down into the description below and see the different ways that you can support me on my mission to spread the word of how we can all together live a brighter future. So thanks for being here. Enjoy the video. All right, so first, if you want to introduce yourself, explain a little bit about who you are and also where we are.
Yeah. So my name is Skip Backus. I've been here at Omega for 42 years. For about 20 of that, I was CEO, and now I'm sort of transitioning out of that role, and I'm actually, what's my title is CEO Emeritus. And we're standing now down on the south facade of the Omega Center for Sustainable Living. Looking at this now, I stood here 15 years ago, and this was literally just a gravel landscape that rolled up to the parking lot. And now it is one of the world's foremost centers for wastewater reclamation and certified Living Building Challenge and LEED Platinum building. The closed loop system part of it refers more to the hydrological cycle on the campus. So basically the way it works at Omega is we don't have a municipal sewer or water system. We have to pull the water out of the ground from deep wells. From there, we send it up to a cistern about 300 feet different in elevation to create water pressure, use it for everything on campus, food preparation, showers, toilets, etc. Then what happens is we now reclaim 100% of that wastewater process as it moves through what's called the eco machine. And the way that that works is I always like to start with a toilet, because that's really what people think is, brown and nasty and, ooh, let me get away from it, so forth. And actually, that is one of the most important parts of a wastewater process, is understanding that that brown and nasty is actually gold. And how do you deal with that as a facility that uses on average about 35, 40,000 gallons of water a day? And so what happens is, again, you pull the water out of the ground, send it to the top of the hill to create water pressure, use it for all your uses. From a wastewater process, you go down to what are first called solid settling tanks, and they're exactly that. Solids drop out there, and we inject those tanks with microorganisms and start breaking those down into slurry. Runs again, fortunately for us, we're on the side of a hill, so we use gravity a lot. And so it runs downhill then to a series of tanks that are in the parking lot. And those are called equalization tanks. And what they do is they take flow that has peak times. All facilities have peak flow times. And you don't want to design a building to a peak flow. You want to design to an average flow. Otherwise, you have to build something 3 times the size to accommodate a peak flow. So what they do is they equalize the flow over 24 hours. That's why they're called equalization tanks. From there, it comes into a series of anoxic tanks, constructed wetlands, aerated lagoons, and a sand filter, until basically you send that water that has now been changed by only microorganisms and plants to water quality that is beyond the tertiary level, that basically looks like it's coming out of your kitchen faucet. Wow. That we then send back to a series of chambers that trickles it back down into the aquifer, and we start over. We pull it out again and use it. So we have a closed hydrological loop on the campus. The water we use comes out of the ground, we utilize it, purify it, put it back. And so that's the key point in relationship in understanding as a global community how we really have to manage water. It's called, basically for us, it's managed aquifer recharge. And we actually presented at the UN on that. And one of the sort of political reasons for it is we're in a small town here, basically, and we use a lot of water. So basically, you want to be able to be in a place where you're being responsible to how you're using water. But that's sort of the mechanical story of it.
Yeah.
The real story of this is that
That's
how people live with water, basically how they understand where their water comes from, what happens when they flush a toilet, all the things that now you hear about from the PFOA, forever chemicals in water, pharmaceuticals in water, just the struggle to be able to have adequate water and water that's clean enough to be able to, frankly, drink. And so how do all those processes really work? So here we were faced with an infrastructure challenge 20 years ago, where we knew our septic systems here, how we dispose of wastewater, was on borrowed time.
and so before it was a leach field,
A
right?
leach field, yeah. It was a simple residential leach field.
Right.
Which,
And so just for the people watching, the leach field, it's basically just a dump field for wastewater, and then they would treat it with chemicals, if I'm not mistaken. Yes.
a leach field basically is a trench in the ground that the wastewater goes in, sits there, and percolates into the ground. There's no real treatment that happens other than the microorganisms that occur naturally in soil. So we're walking now up to the building, and we're passing what are called constructed wetlands. And these are about 5 foot deep. Rubber liner, think of a swimming pool. It's filled with gravel, and the wastewater comes in here in its third step. And when it comes in here, it's still pretty brown and nasty. But with plants and microorganisms, by the time we, by gravity again, fall out of these cells, it really has changed. It looks a lot cleaner, has no odor, and it's basically ready to be moved up into the aerated lagoon section. But, you know, this view today is it illustrates one of the main things we were trying to communicate, that wastewater is just a step in a process that actually is one of the miracles of nature's way of organizing how we can live in right relationship. When you look across here right now, it's beautiful. And yet what's actually happening here is all that brown and nasty and everything that we want to shy away from is actually producing this beauty as part of its process.
So to put it in very simple terms, we're taking poo water and turning it into extremely pure, living water.
Exactly. Reusable and able to recharge an aquifer without any of the negative things that you would look at in terms of high nitrogen levels and so forth that cause a lot of the problems that we're facing in streams and rivers and ponds in terms of excessive algae growth and so forth and so on. So the system was basically an opportunity for us to be able to educate people to the relationship between how they make their decisions every day, understanding the process of water, understanding in a lot of ways what is the embedded process of water that's almost invisible to people. You're standing here wearing this shirt. Well, this shirt took so many gallons of water that will never be used again to be made. Okay, so that's part of my personal impact, okay? When I take a drug or I put face cream on or hair lotion or whatever, all of those things impact water. So understanding how I am in that relationship is an opportunity to be able to mitigate the negative impacts. And so more and more for us, as we're now in our 15th year of operation, we are probably approaching 95 million gallons of water purified.
Wow.
And all of that was done with net zero energy and no chemicals.
So one of the questions that's been in the back of my mind is, this is a sizable operation, but can this be scaled down to even be used, maybe it'd be like a small community level or even just on an individual home level?
Yeah, well, great question. I was just putting together the list of the number of organizations that have come through on tours for the last 15 years. And the number of organizations in there that are actually developers, that are doing, track housing with 30 units, or, are working on replanning something that does not have a direct sewer system. And so they have to come up with alternative systems. These systems basically will adapt and scale to however you put the pieces together. And the thing about an eco machine is they're unique to the particular application. I can't take this and go somewhere else and do it, but I can take the core principles and go somewhere else and do it. And so the technology is applicable in many, many, many different scenarios. From community development, we have a couple of other examples of facilities like this where we've consulted and created these. We have museums. We have many, many different places that have looked at this as a way to either move the awareness in their community about water or to deal with an actual issue they're having. We had a group from China come that was concerned about manufacturing wastewater and how they could purify that. And they came and studied what we were doing here as a way to apply these key principles to their questions.
So as far as the decontamination aspects, do all of these plants and all of the microorganisms, do they play a role in the removal of something like PFAS or, heavy metals and stuff along those lines?
Yeah, well, as Dr. John Todd, who, really was, my primary partner in working and creating the eco machine here, would say there's a plant and a microorganism for every purpose. And so this is particular for here. The thing is, human waste is not that complicated to deal with. You have a lot of issues in it in terms of pharmaceuticals and in and other contaminants that make it into the water stream. So like you're talking about now, the latest big charge is about PFOAs and PFOS and forever chemicals.
Yeah.
Well, that's been when you're in the water sort of community, that's been in the conversation for years and years and years.
Yeah.
It's just now made it percolated to so forth to the top, where
Now-
that's the next new issue.
There's microplastics as well, which is that's
Microplastics,
the
it's,
yeah.
you know, you can go down a long list of water issues. And so you get, you know, you have to remember that the primary thing that we look at is what is the water the total amount of water we're purifying every day. What's in that water? What level of purification are we going for at the end of the process, and what each step does in that. And there's a whole lot of very technical sort of biology that exists in each step. The organisms in these tanks that are buried underground here, you can see the metal caps, are organisms that very low oxygen, that particularly like that environment, where the organisms, when we go inside by the aerated lagoons, we actually inject air in there, different set of organisms. And they all play their role as you're moving through the purification process. And one of the things we did, because we were really interested in understanding what's in our water, okay? What comes out of the ground? What's the quality of that? What's in it? So looking at, do we have PFOS, PFOAs? Do we have, and that's, those two sort of categories are like the tip of an iceberg. There's 100 chemicals underneath that they just haven't, you know, come up with a snappy phrase for yet to be able to say, hey, these things are in your water too.
Yeah.
You know? So we test the water that's coming out of the ground. And then we worked with a certified lab on, all right, so what's happening through this process? And so we tested the water coming into the equalization tanks. And in there, we found everything you would think, from antibiotics to hormone things to acetaminophen to caffeine to everything. And we followed it through the different parts of the eco machine process. And when we got to the very end, we had removed somewhere around 98% of those compounds. Now,
Wow.
we can't tell you what actually happened.
Yeah.
Do we have a lot of happy organisms, you know, that are just living off of all the antidepressants and very, you know, so forth?
Yeah.
Or have they been absorbed by the biomass of the plants? Or have they actually changed their chemical nature? You know, we don't know. That's the next level of examination. But it's all part of understanding, you know, what is our impact on the water that we're using out of the aquifer. We're in the Little Wappingers watershed that moves down and basically connects eventually to the Hudson River. And so we're all connected. And so understanding our overall impact in the larger scope of things is really, you know, an important view that we take.
Yeah.
But to go back now to just, you know, why? Okay, why do this? Because frankly, it was a lot cheaper to just put what I refer to just as a green box water purification system.
Sure.
Lower it out in the parking lot, plug yourself in, pour chemicals in the top, and you're off and running. But as you'll see, when we walk into the aerated lagoon section, we do tours for all the participants that come here to Omega, and on Wednesdays and Saturdays. And one of the things that happens is when you're talking about wastewater, people go right away to that brown and nasty, and they come in here and they say beautiful. And what that does is it just gives you that little opportunity to be able to educate, to be able to ask the questions, you know, that they have, to be able to reach in and connect them at a deeper level to their relationship to water. That's one of the most important things that we realized here when we were looking at our original difficulty: how do we deal with wastewater? And I was very lucky to have Dr. John Todd and a couple of other people here for one of our conferences that we called Water of Life. And there we all sat down around the table And I remember it like it was yesterday. How are we going to deal with our wastewater here at Omega? They were throwing out different ideas of you can do this kind of a plant or that kind of a mechanical system or whatever. And John just basically laid it on the table and said, this is a perfect spot to be able to really demonstrate that if we look at nature as ourselves as part of nature and not take the solution out of the natural cycle, not take it out of our relationship to nature, that you can demonstrate something here that has amazing strength and potential to be able to move the dial around understanding what that relationship needs to be going forward in order for us to just as a species, frankly, survive and how we use water.
Yeah.
Ourselves and globally. And we're standing right now, we're standing next to part of the process where this water is about 36 hours into the process.
I was going to ask that. Yeah.
And we have right now probably close to 500 people here on campus. And they're all using the toilet. And it's all coming down the hill to here. And there's one thing I learned really early on in this is there's no way to stop wastewater.
Yeah.
You can't run around and tell people, hey, don't flush that toilet. So you have to understand the immediacy of wastewater and how to basically be ready for what you're going to learn. Because my understanding and relationship to water is totally different now. 15 years of living and working in wastewater has changed my life.
So that's a question I do have for you is, so as far as your origins and not just getting into this, but did you have a strong interest, not just in the sustainability aspects of water, but the health and wellness aspects? Like, when did all of that kind of start for you personally?
Well, 1981. In 1981, I met with a couple of friends of mine up in New Lebanon, New York, Stefan and Elizabeth, who are the co-founders of Omega. And I was given the opportunity to come down here and do some work on the buildings. And fell in love with the place. And also very quickly realized that I had a chance here to be able to work in ways that never would have been afforded me in the contracting industry. That would have allowed me to enter a dialogue and actually step into a lot of the cause work that I was already working in up there in terms of solar and sustainability and so forth.
But was that when you were a contractor?
When
Was
I was
that
a contractor,
the main sort of focus was sustainability?
Yeah, I had been working for a long time in very early days of what it meant to think about energy envelopes, to think about how to integrate solar and so forth. So coming here and having the opportunity to look at 250 something acres with a lake at the bottom and people that were listening and understanding the opportunity that existed from an educational standpoint, because Omega is a not-for-profit education organization. So basically, it opened up something in me that was, all right, maybe I can live out some of this here. And then basically over the years, speaking with different people and getting more and more confident, it just became, yeah, okay, let's go for this. Okay, there's a way to take something as critical as this issue about water and be able to use the structure that exists within the educational methodology of Omega to be able to illustrate the potential that we have as human beings to really step forward and manage that intersection in a way that is sustainable, not only for ourselves personally, but for the globe.
Yeah.
Because this is going to be the issue, water.
Yeah.
There's no question. And everybody thinks, oh, it's going to happen somewhere in Africa or the Far East.
That's already
This is going to happen in Arizona.
Yeah.
It's going to happen in New Mexico, and it's going to happen in New York. And, so basically, as an organization, to be able to have a footprint that allows us to speak to the essential nature of water at the scale that we can is really part of our mission now. And it's become, over the years, really something that I'm very passionate about. It's become part of my personal mission. So, I look at these plants and, it's a miracle. And it's a miracle, it's magic, and it's something that you have to believe, because the organisms themselves, I can't tell you why they do what they do, okay? I can't tell, all I can do is, after a certain amount of time, and it took a couple of years for me to trust the process. But that's part of the puzzle too, to be able to, like, if we can, as individuals, be able to trust that nature has a way, and that we can actually, move forward as a culture, move forward as a society that's not back to mud huts like some people talk about it,
Yeah.
but just from a standpoint of understanding what is truly sustainable. But water is the primary issue. Water is the beginning and end of all conversations, because you can't forget it. If you don't have potable water, forget it. And you can't build homes, you can't do anything. It gets crazy.
So I thought it was kind of funny, the story that you told about with the Dalai Lama. I don't know if you're able to share that,
Yeah,
but if you are.
Yeah. Well, basically, I have been privileged to sit with amazing people that as a contractor, I never would have sat with, from Maya Angelou to Madeleine Albright to Bill Clinton to Jane Fonda, you name it, that's come through this organization over the years. And I had the opportunity to be able to, I thought, just have a simple, walk by, give the little nod and move on. And I got stopped in the process and actually got to talk about, he had obviously been cued about this building and the Eco Machine. And so I had the opportunity to talk to him, and what I said was, well, if you come to Omega, what you're going to see is all the toilet water comes through and all these flowers bloom out of it. And he was just like, he has this famous giggle. And so he started to laugh, and he basically was just saying, so you make beauty out of waste. And basically, yes, that's what this does. And because it makes beauty out of waste, it creates an opportunity to stop people. People, we're all moving 1,000 miles an hour. And so as an organization, we're always looking at what are the aspects and points of intervention for us to possibly get in and start another dialogue and ask another question, move the dial a little bit, talk about something not talked about maybe in their life, but yet move it in a way that brings everybody to a better understanding of how we each are responsible to each other and responsible to nature. And so to be able to make beauty out of waste created one of those moments. And every Wednesday and every Saturday and by appointment, we walk people in here and we walk them under this Monstera plant, and we remind them that, did you use the bathroom coming in?
No.
Okay, well, I would say to you, if you did, you were a part of this.
I did go to the bathroom before I came here, but that was up in the cafe.
Yeah, that's fine. Then the cafe, it comes here.
Yep.
So, and the funny thing is, I was thinking for a minute as you were trying to remember where you went to the bathroom, that even if you had not gone to the bathroom here, you're still part of this. Because it's all the same. It's all the same. Water molecules are not separated between New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. There's one water. And so how we all choose to interact with it. So, going back, it was the potential to be able to, as an organization, demonstrate how we can look at our impact in a particular location in a way that both mitigated any negative impact, but created an opportunity to be able to reach out from that.
Yeah.
And so that brought us to this place of building an Eco Machine and a Living Building Challenge LEED Platinum building, which was totally insane.
So tell us a little more about that. So as far as what do those qualifications mean, and just some examples in the building?
What they meant in my life for a couple of years was just insanity, because we were the guinea pig for the Living Building Challenge. And if you don't know about Living Building Challenge, visit Living Building Institute. And now it is a fulsome organization doing amazing global work. But when we intersected with it, there wasn't any organization. There were no guidelines. There was a goal that basically we would try to achieve a certain level of sustainability that was past what was called the LEED program. And so in that, LEED program is a series of points. You get a certain number of points for everything you do. If you generate a certain amount of electricity, you get a point. If you have a bike rack, you get a point. It goes on and on like that. If it's insulated to a certain level, you get a point. Living Building Challenge, you have to generate 100% of the energy used by the building at the site. You have to harvest all the rainwater. You have to not have a long list of what they call red list chemicals in the building, polyvinyl chloride, mercury, lead, etc. And all the materials have to come from within a certain distance, and you have to be able to prove that your construction carbon footprint was below a certain level, and on and on and on and on. All very, very difficult to do. At that point, 15 years ago, there were no guides. There were no lists of how do you find something that doesn't have one of these chemicals in it. And when you would call up a company and say, do you have, and you're gasketing around your HVAC unit, okay, what is it made up of? They'd hang up on you.
Yeah, they have no idea.
They don't want you to know, first of all. And then they probably have, I'm sure they know, but now you can go online at that site or any number of sites now, and that's all laid out for you. But for us, it wasn't there. So I literally had a team of people besides the construction team, and besides building a wastewater treatment plant, which involved all of these agencies, to manage the process and the intersection between striving to achieve Living Building Challenge certification and LEED Platinum within that greater process of building a wastewater treatment plant to fulfill the requirements dictated by various groups of engineers. And that went on for a long, long period of time up front of actually taking the first hammer out of my apron and whacking a nail. And so why don't we just go into the mechanical room for a minute?
Sure.
It shows you a lot of the story too. In fact, this is one of my favorite doors. This door, if you're a film buff, it's film noir. This door used to have, there's a movie, the detective is Sam Spade with Humphrey Bogart, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And this glass matched that door in his office, but I had to take it out because it wasn't tempered safety glass.
Yeah.
But the door is the same. And this is a salvage door, as are many of the doors in this building, because you see, there's already an embedded carbon footprint in this door. And if that gets thrown in the dump, it's lost. But by salvaging it, bringing it here, okay, you're in a way sequestering that carbon and reusing it. And so as we go in here, mechanical rooms are typically with a door that says keep out and so forth. And this room you'll see is relatively large, and it holds a lot of the behind the scenes of how this actually all works. And I'll flip the light on here. The building is heated and cooled with geothermal. The constant temperature of the earth about 50 feet down. If you put your hand on here, you're going to feel exactly what that feels like. And what it is that we pump water through a series of wells outside, collect that differential in temperature, and bring it in here, and then utilize it, radiant heat in the floor, HVAC, air conditioning. Also in here, on that wall, that's the rainwater pump. We collect all the rainwater off of the roof, and on the floors, your pump and your filters and so forth. And it's about 30,000 gallon tank out there, and we use that for flushing the toilets and any maintenance that we do. The water fountain and the hand sink, because I have to have it be public water, because I hold the public water license for here, has to be directly from the wells. But as a waste stream, waste from here goes into the eco machine as well. So you're closing that loop within this building. Over here on the wall, those are inverters. They take the direct current from the solar panels and convert it to alternating current, which is the way that you use electricity in buildings. And I think we're well over, oh my goodness, over 1.5 million pounds of CO2 saved by the solar system that's on this building. And again, 100% of the energy used in this building, which miraculously includes all the pumps and everything that's used in the wastewater system. So we have a net zero chemical-free wastewater system.
Would you even say it's positive? Like, do you produce excess energy?
We do. We are connected to the grid, and it gets sold back to our energy provider.
Yep, sure.
And it's one of the things that we hope to be able to do more and more of on campus. This is our energy management system. It's a series of meters that basically track how we're using energy, so we can always be learning. Because this, besides how we look at our role with participants and organizations as a learning facility, this is also a learning facility for us. So we're looking at how we manage energy and how we can do better with our lighting, etc. This is I like to call it the brains of the eco machine.
Oh, Lord.
And this is a computer and a series of contact switches and manual switches. And that click you just heard is the computer moving wastewater from one place to the next.
Wow.
And while this is a miracle as a computer, it's still, when it has an issue, it still has to call somebody. So it still calls me, and I'm going to find somebody else for them to call pretty soon. But it tracks how much water is coming in, where is it in the process, and how much water is going out. Because earlier when we talked about the hydrological process, let's just say for a minute I've pumped 10,000 gallons out of the wells, and we've gone up in campus and people have washed their hands and showered and flushed the toilets, and we've cooked some broccoli or whatever. And that water's coming back down here, and it's 10,000 gallons. And first of all, it won't be 10,000 gallons. It'll only be probably about 8, because the people walk around with it in their bodies, and then their bodies evaporated into the air, which is also part of the hydrological process. So then you come down and you're part of that process. See, that's the thing. All along the water usage process here, you're always pointing out that you're in this, like it or not. You are part of the process. And it's being able to get people to feel that, know it in that level, in their gut level of knowing. So from there, when you hit the constructed wetlands with the wastewater, you could have 140-degree temperature on the gravel there from the sun. You're going to evaporate, and you're going to, through transpiration of the plants, lose another 4,000 gallons. So by the time we're all done and we're recharging the aquifer, we're only putting maybe 4,000 gallons back into the aquifer. Now, I'm not sure my math adds up in this illustration, but basically that's what you're doing. And yet you are in the absolute relationship to the hydrological process, because everywhere plants use water. Everywhere, trees, plants put water back into the atmosphere. So it's just constantly being in that relationship.
So with this, for instance, you said that sometimes it'll have to call somebody.
Yeah.
What are some of the common pieces of maintenance or things that need to be done in order to keep the system moving smoothly?
Well, when we first built it, there's a series of, every time you have a pump, and there are about 9 different pump stations, you have to have a filter so that your pump doesn't clog. And when we built it, between the engineers and John, we were thinking we would clean those filters maybe once every month or every other month or whatever. Well, when we first started, we were having to clean those filters every week, which I have to say, that's when I learned a lot about the human anatomy. Because you right away, when you're working in those filters, realize what we digest and what we don't digest. And so one of the things that we found was the reason the filters were clogging is that we were serving whole flaxseed in the kitchen. And the human body does not digest flaxseed. You have to crush it.
Yeah.
And so all those tiny little pieces of flaxseed were clogging the filters. So we took flaxseed out. We now crush anything flaxseed that goes into our food chain up in the kitchen. Also, we had to cut back on how much corn we serve, because the human body does not completely digest the outside husk of the corn kernel. So we dealt with those 2 things, and now we're back cleaning the filters. Because to clean the filters, look, I at one point was thinking of doing a video of cleaning the filters, because it's pretty gross. You have to put on a hazmat suit and goggles and gloves up here, because you're dealing with waste, and wastewater carries all kinds of pathogens, all kinds of things, and now carries COVID. I mean, you're dealing, with, it's a serious undertaking.
In 2020, when all of that was happening, did that affect this process at all? Did you get some outside pressures coming in as far as regulation and things along those lines?
No, not at all. And it's funny, because when we were going through the process of building this, there was all kinds of pressures and all kinds of questions, and the first one was, why are you guys doing this? You have no violations and so forth. And I was saying, yeah, but I know the geology here, and I know that sooner or later I've got a problem. So I want to be in front of that. I don't want to have sewage running down the street and then have to go through all this engineering process to figure out what's going on,
Right.
or how to do it. So that, so the first thing was getting through that process, and then mastering the required monitoring of the system, and really submitting all of those numbers all the time is a whole thing that you have to set up when you're dealing with wastewater facilities, but totally doable. But during the COVID years, we had to shut down. So we had no flows. So the problem that we had was, this is alive. It eats constantly. And so we had to feed it. And so, we used everything from mud from Long Pond to dog food to you name it.
Wow.
Because you don't want to lose all of your
Like the vegetation
all your vegetation,
Yeah.
and all of your microbiology. And it's really interesting because this is a very sustainable and robust system. And for us, because we have a seasonal campus, so in the off season, which basically is November through April, we only have maybe a few thousand gallons of wastewater, as compared to during the season where you'll have 30,000 gallons hit this thing every day. And so the organisms are like multiplying and so forth, and it's all happy. But in the off season, you have a totally different rate of flow, and so you lose a certain percentage of your organisms, and everything sort of slows down, as it would naturally do in the winter anyway. Okay, but it doesn't freeze because microorganisms throw off heat. And so what happens is, when we get close to opening, we bring back in groups of people. We don't just slam it with 500 people.
Right.
We'll bring on our staff, percentage of our staff first. They all start flushing the toilets, and the organisms get happier and multiply. And then by the time we're having 500 people on campus, we're full and robust. The plants are woken up, and the organisms are ready to go.
Wow. So they're, in a way, it's almost like the system itself does kind of hibernate in the winter. I mean,
Yeah.
So we're in New York, obviously, so we get snow, and we experience cold winters and stuff.
Well, we hope we get snow.
Yeah, we hope. Yeah.
In my lifetime, it's really changed here.
Yeah.
If we get one major snow, we're all like out there playing in it right away, because we don't know if we're going to get another one.
Right.
Because it's changed so radically, which is another piece of the problem that we're starting to deal with, which is the way that it rains here is different. And it used to get, like a day-long period of rain. And that's how, now you get torrential downpours, and you lose a lot of that water to runoff. So you have to be able to start incrementing on your properties. You want to keep as much of the water as you can. And to keep the water, just to percolate it into your aquifer, you have to slow it down.
Right.
And so how do you do that? There's all kinds of methodologies to how you can capture stormwater.
What do you use here?
We have a series of collection ponds, and we're now looking at taking the gradient of the incline and doing some trenching to catch the water as it moves across the incline before it even gets to the ponds. And then, of course, you try to capture everything off of the roofs with rain barrels and so forth. And
Sure.
But, as is the challenge with a lot of these technologies, is it's not cheap.
Yeah.
And, so...
That was one thing I was going to ask about. So as far as the economics of doing this, generally speaking, how does it stack up against sort of conventional methods?
Well, the per gallon cost for purifying and cleaning wastewater in this methodology is much, much lower than your conventional plants, because you don't have the energy cost, you don't have the chemical cost. But from a development standpoint, when you're actually thinking about building this, for us, this was a lot more expensive, primarily because we, as I said, stepped into a formative role with the Living Building Challenge.
Right.
And we're no guidelines, and we were inventing it as we were going. And the one thing that you really need to know about contracting is the whole thing is about time. So basically, whenever you have a gap occur in a process that you don't know the material or you don't have the material or whatever, cost goes up. And so in figuring out how we could do this, there were a lot of gaps. And so it costs a lot more to do this for that reason. But you can take any of these ideas and treatments that we did here and look at them to develop individually. And then the cost would represent pretty much what it is you're trying to do in that particular location. So this is our awards wall, basically. Living Building Challenge certification, LEED Platinum, letter from the governor, and various other awards that the building has received. But the greatest award for me is standing in this room, because this room is a classroom. And it's a classroom that basically try to explain to state and federal agencies why you want to have a classroom attached to a wastewater treatment facility. However, for us, this building is part of how we open up what we do as an organization to other organizations that are working in the environment, working in human development, social development, et cetera. They can come here and use this space. And it's been used by a long list. You'd recognize all the organizations on the list that have come through here utilizing this space. But in this space, one of the things that, for us, when we were building this building, I had already been on this property for 30 years. And yet we discovered we had a federally registered species on the property, the northern cricket frog. And so we had to do a habitat study of the frog and really learn, are we just building over frog habitat here or whatever? And it was determined that the frog lives 250 feet from the lake, which is down below here, so we had no problem. We started construction again. And then it was further determined that the frog hops 450 feet, which put the frog right in the middle of the building. So we had to build a frog-proof barrier around the entire 4-acre construction site.
So along the lines of things like that, that's something that it's very hard to predict something like that.
No, you can't make it up. No.
So were there any other sort of more obscure complications that you ran into? I know you said it was kind of insanity as far as everything
Well, the first thing was when I stood up at the end of the road coming into the parking lot here and stopped every contractor, looked in their truck and said, "You can't come in." "What do you mean I can't come in?" "You have at least 10 of the red list chemicals in your truck. You can't come in until you get them out of your truck." And these guys are driving around with those in their truck all the time. And you don't realize, that there's this whole thing that's not talked about, that how many times we're exposed to things. What is, the impact of some of these compounds that were utilized, to quote, better our way of living, that basically have undermined our way of living. And these guys are driving around with those in their truck all the time. So that was one. But then when they got their trucks clean and they tried to come in again, they can't smoke on the site. They have to compost their lunch if they don't eat it all. They can't swear. And, so they were like, okay, where am I now? What world is this, But what it did was it laid the foundation to be able to start a training, because the actual construction of this building was an educational training for every single person that worked on it. And that, again, was part of the original goal, okay? That you don't, how do we as an educational organization look at project development as that kind of a tool? And so when we had the issue with the frog, I brought in people from local environmental organizations to educate the entire construction crew about the frog. And so they all played a role in monitoring the fence every day. They took turns walking the 4-acre fence.
I'm sure some of them kind of found to like it once they got involved in it.
Oh, absolutely. They've all 15 years later. First of all, some of them are still working on projects with me, and they're all incorporated in this way of like, okay, there's something greater going on here. And so what's my relationship? to that, you know. But for us, the one main thing it did was I stopped all development on the property. And the reason I stopped all the development was that I didn't know what was here, you know? And I'm going to open these shades up a little bit for you.
Sure.
And they're a great example of the red list chemical list. And because go try to find roller shades that don't have some of those chemicals in it. And
what are some examples of things that I know, like formaldehyde's a big one, just other off-gassing chemicals and stuff
you know,
like that?
there's mercury, lead, you know, while lead has been, you know, removed from the paints and removed from, you know, plumbing fixtures and so forth, it shows up in other places. And so you still have to be, you know, watching for all of that. And there's many, many chemicals that are on the list that have, you know, names that are like 30 letters long that basically are in fabric when you make synthetic fabrics, which is one of the primary things used for shades and blinds.
Yeah.
So this took us a long time to find these, and yeah.
So what are these shades made of?
I don't remember the exact chemical or manufacturer of these as I'm standing here, but I remember the amount of time it took me to find them, and same with the carpet that's on the floor, same with the concrete that makes up the walls. The concrete is a proprietary blend to here that we had to create because concrete has all kinds of additives in it that we had to get rid of to meet the Living Building Challenge. But what we did was when we were doing and looking at the impact of the cricket frog, we froze all development of the campus and brought in teams to study the campus for us. So what is happening on the campus? What are the species that are present here? And we did that without property lines because bears and deer and other animals don't know that we own this and somebody else owns that. So we now have mapped how everything moves around the campus. So when we look to develop the campus further, we have a greater understanding of what our impact is and what our relationship is and what we want to preserve. And that's part of stewarding property, is to really be able to at a very deep level understand where you are and how to step into that.
On a home individual level, because a lot of people, you know, like you said, everyone's going a million miles a minute.
Yeah.
And so, you know, people would probably be like, you know, I don't have time for this, which honestly, in a lot of cases can be a very valid argument. Like you even said yourself, the resources required to do this is extensive.
Yeah.
But what are some like just even small things that people can do? I would say, you know, even just around the idea of being more mindful of the place that they're actually living, maybe just like studying in their yard, learning the plants in their yard. Like I grew up on a marsh, and so I'm used to studying all the birds. And
one of the things that you always are looking at when you're running a facility is how am I offsetting the carbon impact of running this thing here at Omega? Now I got people that drive here from all over, you know, what's the footprint of this, you know, and so on and so on. When you develop something like a constructed wetland, the carbon offset of these is incredible. And so when you look at managing property, anytime that you can leave it alone and let there be a bush there or unmowed lawn or whatever, you're ahead of the game. You know, you're moving yourself more in alignment with a balanced position, you know? And, you know, so for us, what I'm really looking at now is how to deepen the educational experience when people come in here, how to, you know, just be able to communicate it, you know, more better, and also how to expand this to the rest of the campus so that when you're in a room and you're staying here and you're in the bathroom, you have what you flushed away 2 days later, you know, or whatever, you know, and just to further build it in, along with everything else that we're doing here on campus, from local food, local agriculture to, you know, getting rid of petroleum-based energy sources and looking at solar to generate hot water and on and on and on, you know.
It's an amazing amount of thoughtfulness and consideration. I mean, so even the deck, is this recycled?
Yeah, everything that makes up this building, the siding is from a mushroom farm in Pennsylvania. All of the wood around the window trim and so forth is from a factory that was dismantled in Kingston, New York, and remilled for here. The all the framing materials for that half of the building, we were able to salvage the first Obama inaugural platform, and all those materials came from there. And then you just keep going with the story. And the way that when we first started this, we had sort of a, you have to remember you're here at Omega, so everything is, we do a lot of, whenever there's an opportunity for a party or a ceremony, so we did a whole thing. We went down to the lake and took 5-gallon pails of mud and muck out of the lake and brought it up here to seed the eco machine. So the organisms that are working on all of this are the same organisms that are working around the lake. And they're the same organisms that are working on the side of the thruway when you see some cattails growing. Okay, those are all eco machines. So it's not like you as a homeowner can say, okay, I'm going to just create an eco machine at my house. That's not going to work, primarily because of the way the economy is set up in our country, unless you totally own the house outright, and then probably still have issues with the local health departments, because they won't allow an eco machine on individual property because of the underwriters of mortgages and the transferability of those particular systems. Suppose you love doing an eco machine, but the person that buys your house doesn't want to bother with it, okay, and you don't have a typical wastewater treatment system there, then that's a problem. So they're managing it by not allowing that to happen. But the opportunity is for whenever you're looking at a town or a community, to be able to start to lay in the potential for shared resource to be able to deal with the issues of the first finding water and then purifying water as part of a community. Because then you also have something that binds the community together, because there's work to do here every day. There's work to do here. So if you're living in a community of 30 homes or whatever, or 100 homes, which is all totally doable, everybody could have a role to play in this, and it becomes part of what their community actually does as a fabric of living in that community. And just it's a way of connecting. And so for us, it's how do we continue to develop this? How do we continue to offer it? What programs do we develop around this, et cetera?
So a question that just came up, as someone who's prospected a intentional community, if you will, and I mean, Omega Ice, in my eyes at least, is a very successful intentional community. You see a lot of them kind of start and then they kind of fizzle out. What was one of your greatest challenges that you overcame while you were here?
Well, it still is our greatest challenge, and that is that you're, as a not-for-profit, you live in a certain economy that is not really set up to 100% support the not-for-profit community. The challenges that you face around capital development, around managing expenses, and we lived on a thread from 1979 through when COVID hit in 2019. We lived on a thread year to year, and we're a relatively large type organization for this mission statement, and so everybody right away thinks, they got it, they have a ton of money. We have no money. We basically, when somebody comes in and stays here, that money pays salary, pays electric bills, pays all the things that make up the economy of Omega. And when COVID hit, we lost our revenue stream for 2 years, and we're now just starting to, we're slowly building out again over multiple years, and we're still only operating at maybe 2/3 of what we did. We had one of our best years ever in 2019. So we're down almost half our staff from what we were. Everybody's wearing 6 hats, and so there's the unsettledness that's in the country impacts availability for funds to be able to sort of underwrite the nonprofit community. And so as we're all like trying to get into the same pot of money and figure it out, it's complicated now. It's very complicated, and it's a struggle every single year. We're looking now at different ways of working membership, building greater capacity in our development outreach, and also trying to balance off expense against how much we charge people to come here. But there's a real balance point that has to be struck there, because if you charge people too much, they won't come. And yet you have to charge what it costs to have them be here.
Yeah.
And we just took in New York State, we just took a 16% August 1st 16% increase in the delivery charge for electricity. Well, for an average homeowner, that might amount to $400 a year. I forget what the actual number was, but for us, you're talking about $25,000-$30,000.
Yeah.
And so, okay, here's my price point for my people coming here, and now that's going up. Food cost is going up. Insurance cost is going up, and you wind up with a gap, and you have to fill that gap, and you're always trying to manage that gap. And we're doing okay. We're surviving. We're here, but the challenges are more intense. And now we're in an election year. Who knows what's going to happen there?
Yeah.
And the recession word has come back up in the last week or so.
Over again. Yep.
And so who knows what'll happen with that? And so it just is part of life as a not-for-profit.
Yeah.
So.
Now, I know you may not have a clear answer on this, but what are some ways that people can support Omega in sort of long-term vision, or creating a bit of peace around the chaos when it comes to all that, if there is anything?
Yeah, learn about Omega, know who we are, know what we're doing and why we're doing it. What is our mission? How do we live our mission? There's so many things, like people, there's a surface look at Omega, which is basically fine. You can come here and take a program in yoga or art or whatever. And believe me, at the foundation of personal development is number one. However, there are a lot of other aspects to Omega. Our work with in women's centers, in work we're doing with different areas of the country that are underserved, with the opportunity to be able to, look at some of the curriculum we have. We also are a recognized entity with the United Nations. So we work all around the world bringing underserved country representatives to the COP conferences at the UN around environment. And so there's a lot of work behind the scenes that makes up Omega. So I would say the first thing is learn who we are. Think about where your personal intersection point is there. If you see a program, come and take it, because and then if there's some way that you find an avenue into working with us, let us know. If you can introduce us to funding or to grant or to whatever, that's great too. But also understand the values of the mission, our values. And for us, it's not like we need every single person to wake up and go, I want to support Omega. More importantly, it's about having people wake up to understand why we're doing what we're doing, and how in their lives they can bring these things to their purpose life. And so I think, there will be a point there where the economy will come back and support Omega and what it's doing, because its mission is essential to human development.
Yeah.
And so I have confidence in that. Even though that's today, talk to me tomorrow, I'll have a slightly different attitude just because of what happened that day.
Yeah.
But overall, I'm an optimist, and I don't think I would have chosen to stay 42 years if there wasn't something real here.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, that's where, my own personal gauge of things, and looking at different organizations and what we do here, there's an authenticity here and a genuine openness and exploration to what is the human condition. And how, as an organization, can we help that personally and in a broader scope culturally? And so I think we're heading into a potentially very exciting time, and I'm very optimistic about it. However, this is not going to be an easy ride.
No, it's going to be very chaotic.
And, you know, while we get excited about particular points in that are happening now and so forth, it's the next number of years is going to be very tough because, in my opinion, we are not responding quickly enough to the climate change challenge. And we need to do more quickly because in my lifetime, I have seen radical change. And I'm living a very privileged life. First of all, I live in the Northeast, and I live at a certain strata of economy. And so I consider myself at the top edge of fortunate. However, when I explore outside of that, and a lot of this comes from the work we do through the UN with these developing countries, there's serious questions and challenges. And so we need to sort of get it moving. And so I'm hoping after the election that we can have enough space and time and a little less frustration where whatever happens, we're able to start to move more quickly on the key issues that we're going to face. And that's what this facility is about. And that's what we're doing here at Omega, is to basically build ourselves as healthy as possible as an organization in such a way that we can be and offer help and solution as we all go forward.
Wow. It's been about 2 months since I filmed all of this with Skip at the Omega Institute. And I have to say that this is a true marvel of engineering on so many levels when it comes to sustainability, but just in general, the thoughtfulness and the precision and the conscientiousness in which they approached this was profound. And I'm sitting here still just in awe of what they've managed to accomplish there at the Omega Institute. And this is just an aspect of the Omega Institute. They also have incredible workshops, incredible seminars and educational programs. And the campus, the people, everything about Omega is just a really beautiful experience. I highly, highly recommend that if you've never been, that you make a journey at least once in your life. It is truly a magical place to be and to spend some time. So I'm going to put some links down in the description below where you can support Omega. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time to watch this documentary. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. And until the next video, bye-bye.